Hi there, welcome to Boxing Deep Dive. I'm Lyndon Hosking and great to have you along for episode 37 of the Deep Dive show. And we've got plenty to get through tonight. We've got all the events from Wednesday night's No Limit show. We've got this coming weekend's DNL/Tasman Fighters pay-per-view. And of course all the news from around the world, as well as a lot of talking points to get through. So back by popular demand, I will say, my co-host again for this episode is Mike Altamura. Hi, Mike. Great to have you back on, and thanks for joining the show again.
Popular demand, you say? I think the 1996 version of myself is just thrilled to be back here speaking with you, because you're one of the fighters, of course, that I idolized watching as a young kid. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here talking boxing with you again.
Appreciate it, mate. I wish I could go back to my 1996 self as well, mate, I tell you. So quite a few years older now, but no, it's good, mate. As I said at the start, we've got a lot to get through. Wednesday night's massive no limit show, and also this weekend's like even bigger show, of course, with Opetai challenging for the world title. So we'll get into things straight away. Of course, the Aussie news. We went through a lot last week. There's actually almost too much to get through this week. This week we haven't got as much, but I just want to probably go into a little bit more depth as far as what has actually happened. I don't like to sort of skim over things. I like to, as the name of the show says, deep dive. So what I want to get to for starters is the fight. The main event, of course, is Liam Wilson. He won a 10-round decision over Mairis Briedis. I think that's how you pronounce it. Now, last week you said you'd actually seen a bit of Briedis. You actually sat ringside for his world title fight. What did you see last night, and what did he bring? And of course, what did Liam Wilson bring to obviously get the win?
I think Briedis was very determined, very intense. He definitely didn't come to Australia for a payday. He was given plenty of notice. So I think you've seen that. He was well prepared, and at stages early in the fight, like the first couple of rounds, it looked like Liam Wilson had the capability to possibly blast him out of there. He wasn't reacting too well, Briedis, to some of them right hands. And Liam's got a really nice, sharp, straight right hand, and then backs it up with a real precise left hook. Nice short left hook. He caught him a few times with it, and I thought maybe, if he landed a bit more consistently, kept it at range, he could dissuade Briedis. But to Briedis' credit, come back strong in rounds 3 or 4, won those 2 rounds, I thought, clearly. And then Wilson got back to his boxing. You could see, I think one of the biggest sub-stories within the fight, of course, was the injury to Wilson's left hand and needing to make adjustments. Wilson is a kid who, even when both hands are fine, he's dabbled with switch heading. But I think with Briedis, it would have been a more comfortable style to fight him orthodox. So, Wilson had to walk through some fire. I know there's people that have called out the one scorecard of 99-91 in Wilson's favour, which completely agree that was off course. But I thought the other two were on the money. I thought Wilson 6 rounds to 4, 7 rounds to 3, and I thought he showed a lot of grit after looking absolutely spent, physically gassed in the 9th to come back and win the 10th pretty clearly.
Yeah, he did, and as you said, the scores were 96-94, so 6 rounds to 4, 97-93, 7 rounds to 3, of course, and 99-91. Now, I'm with you. I thought the 99-91 scorecard was preposterous. Was bad, I'll say. Preposterous. I got
preposterous.
It out there. But I mean, 9 rounds to 1. I mean, I know it's not just here; it's all around the world. This happens, but surely that judge, the powers that be, got to talk to him afterwards and just say, hey, look, if you consider yourself, a main event judge, we've got to probably do better than that. I understand the home fighter's always going to win a lot of the close rounds, but geez, Briedis, not that it would have made any difference because, like you said, Liam Wilson clearly won the fight, but, he won clearly more than 1 round, didn't he? He won at least 3 or 4 clear rounds in the fight.
Well, like I said, he won rounds 3 and 4 were pretty clear rounds, and the 9th was a very clear round. And then I think it was either 7th or 8th. I think the 8th round you could have maybe swung his way. Everything else was Wilson's. But I think and the problem we have with officiating in this country is it's something you see regularly, and it's just kind of forgotten. People will call out the scorecard, and then it's forgotten. To me, the most disgraceful thing of last night was the MC calling out, Judge A calls this, Judge B calls this, Judge C. Those judges sign up for those opportunities to be accountable for their scorecards. not where we need to go 3-4 days later on BoxRec to discover which judge actually carded 99-91 and which judges had it on point. I think that it's a public role. It's got huge ramifications in these fighters' careers, both ways. You know, like, I mean, Wilson and his camp, when they go on the road for fights, they want to just about ensure they're going to get a fair shake too. So I'm sure they weren't impressed with that judge's card either, you know, knowing it wasn't fair to the opponent. I just think as a sport, we need to be better. To be taken serious, we need to see less of that, because there's too many fights where people say, oh, well, at least the right guy won. But that's not really the point. When you don't go and correct it, at the absolute best, all you're doing is promoting inferiority and incompetence.
It's a really good point, mate. I must admit, I watched the fight again today, and I didn't notice the judge A, B, C. I must admit, one thing I did notice, and I love Lieutenant Dan. I think he's a great ring announcer. But when he says the winner of the contest, I think he says, mate, it's not a contest. This is a fight. You know, it's a boxing match. I don't like being called a contest. So. But yeah, that aside, that's probably just a nitpicky sort of thing. But I'm with you. I think that the judges, just like the fighters do, everyone needs to be accountable. Name the judges. Maybe, do you think it's a bit of a spin-off of society in this day, mate, with political correctness? We don't want to, put the judges' names out there in case they're bullied or targeted or whatever. I don't know. Who knows? What do you think?
You've got to hold them accountable. How can anyone hold them accountable if they don't know who they are? And if they don't want to be known, stick to small hall fights.
Yep.
This was a WBO international title fight. You know, the ramifications of this fight is a winner's possibly going to go 1 or 2. Needs to be better level of accountability.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, I was just going to say, you mentioned the injury to Liam Wilson during the fight. I must admit, I was staggered when he turned southpaw. Now, I know he has done that in fights before, and he can do it quite effectively, but I'm not really one for changing stances from long range. I don't mind sort of doing it, close to maybe get a bit more leverage or whatever it might be. But from long range, I'm not really for it, because it actually negates yourself. If you're a 100% orthodox fighter, even if you're very good at southpaw, you're going to cut yourself back to 70-75%. So obviously gives your opponent more advantage. Having said that, obviously the reason come out later, of course, that he had that injured left hand. So it was obviously a good strategy, and he actually boxed pretty well, I thought, as a southpaw against Rueda. I think he really struggled. So, look, all in all, it was a great performance from Liam, and I think he'll get a lot out of it.
Yeah, another good battle-hardening fight for him. You know, like similar to what we were discussing with Tim Tszyu last week. I think that, if Wilson comes out of this rank number 2 in the world, you're going to have people that attack the credibility of that ranking or whatever. His team are just doing what they have to do, which is to keep him moving forward. And he does have some solid scalps on his record, as long as he's focused. And I know Benny Harrington won't just rest on his laurels, so to speak. Once the kid's hand is healed up, they'll be back to work. They'll be looking to make some necessary improvements. And to me, Wilson's always going to make for fun fights. He makes for great fights, both domestically and abroad, and I think we got to appreciate what these guys bring to the sport out here. Like last night, we've seen a lot of talk leading into the bout where people were, somewhat disparaging to Rueda a little bit. End of the day, the guy's 37-1. The guy was ranked top 10 in the world. Whether you want to justify that that's legit or not, it doesn't matter. The guy had fought for the world title. The guy been unbeaten since then, was ranked top 10 in the world. And it's great that Australia as a whole is bringing these kind of fights here rather than, it wasn't like this years back. Years back, most of our fighters needed to go abroad to land opportunities. Now, at least, the way things are functioning here, we're starting to bring the bigger fights to our shores.
Yeah, you're right, man. And No Limit, of course, are leading the pack there. But, of course, you've got DNL, obviously, with the big event this week. And there's lots of other promoters around the country that have really lifted their game and have really started to invest some dollars in their fighters and bringing out good quality opponents. And I just think it's great, and we've discussed it in the past about what a little golden age of Aussie boxing is at the moment. I just hope, and I think it's actually happening, that all these fighters actually cash in on the opportunities they've been given. And we've had, obviously, George, we're about to have Tim, we've had the Ebony Bridges and Shanika Johnson, of course, we're about to have Jai, and who knows who's next, and Michael Zarafa, of course, maybe Shannon O'Connell. So it's just a great time, and I'm with you. I'm not sure whether a lot of these opportunities would be happening if it was, maybe 20 years ago where they weren't getting the opportunities that they are now. And I think I said it on last week's episode as well. I've come to really admire Liam. One, obviously he got off the canvas in the fight that he lost against Nine and redeemed himself. But his change in attitude, I think it's really made him mature a little bit as a fighter. And I don't know about you, Mike, but he still seems a little bit unsure of himself, not with his boxing ability, but you hear him talk and he's a bit of a nervous talker, and I just get the impression sometimes he might not be as confident in himself as maybe he should be. And I'm sure that'll come as he goes. But what do you make of it? Because he tends to just get a little bit nervous.
That might be his natural disposition.
Yeah,
that might just be his natural disposition. But the other thing is too, like we've got, I remember having this chat with the great John Scully, who trained Chad Dawson on a world title. And this will give you an example, and then I'll dial it back to what you're asking. So, and John was telling me that one of the bravest performances he ever seen in boxing isn't what you would typify as a brave performance. And it was Calvin Grove against Julian Solis on his toes for 10 rounds, boxing and moving and creating angles and dipping and ducking, and got out of there, won the decision. And John said to me, when he seen him in the dressing room, he was stretched out on a table and couldn't move. His legs were on fire, could barely stand, could barely walk. But that was the kind of courage. And people don't think of that as courage. People think of Arturo Gatti, Mickey Ward, blood and guts warriors as courageous. Ray Boom Boom Mancini, probably my favourite fighter of all time outside Lester Ellis. But people think of guys like that to typify warriors. And I think the same goes for the mindset of athletes and of their attitude. Some people just got a different way of conveying how they feel or what they're thinking. And for some people, a little bit of nerves actually fuels them a good way. It holds them accountable. It keeps them sharper, fresher, mind on the job. I just think that there's no one size fits all as to how to approach this sport mentally.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. And I suppose what I'm sort of trying to say is that I think it's probably an insight into a fighter's mentality that people out there, like you said, they all think Arturo Gatti or a Jeff Fennick or Mike Tyson when they think of boxers, and they don't realise that a lot of boxers can be very insecure to themselves. They obviously have got to portray a different persona when they get in the ring. But, as I said, just listening to Liam talk, I think he still has some sort of doubts. He has no reason to doubt himself, by the way. But I'm hoping as he gets on, and these wins are obviously going to instill that confidence in him as he goes. And I just think he's a great talent. I think the world's his oyster. But as I said, I heard him talk at the press conference, and this is the guy also. I think he said in his last fight with Noine, he actually cried on the way to the ring. So again, it sort of just highlights some of the feelings that goes through a fighter's body or brain, or whatever you might call it, when they're in that situation. And until I suppose you're in that situation, you don't actually understand the thoughts that go through these guys. And that's why I always get a little bit pissed with a lot of people on social media who have no right to comment on things like that, when these guys, and you know yourself, that the fortitude and the guts that these guys, whether they're world champions or just prelim fighters or journeymen, the guts that it takes for these guys to go in there and the mental demons they must overcome. Just, if you're on social media, just think twice about it before you target these guys who are just human like the rest of us.
Yeah, and with fighters, to me, they're always marching towards fire.
Yep.
It's just how they learn to control that fire. And for some people, they get a little bit closer before they see danger. With other people, they tread with caution every which way, which, like I said, that's why you have different makeups and different temperaments. And we have to respect all these kids that give their lives for the sport and get in there. They never step out of the ring 100% whole like they did walking in. Yeah. Even if they just took one jab, whatever, you got to understand all the trade-offs, sacrifices, everything leading up into the fight, lifestyle-wise, sparring, and so forth. We've got to accord and demonstrate our highest respect to all these guys.
Yep, exactly, mate. And as I said, if you're on social media, just think twice before you have your say. I'll tell you one guy who's not short on confidence, and that's this guy. Paulo Acousto demolished Robert Berridge inside 2 rounds. Now, mate, you've managed a lot of fighters over the years. This kid's got all the tools, hasn't he?
He looked really good in this fight. I thought that Berridge was a little bit foolish in questioning Acousto's power in the lead-up, I think.
Learned the hard way, didn't he?
he learned the hard way. They might not look that powerful, but when they land that accurate and that clean, they're going to take you out. And I like the traps he was setting here. I thought, even though Berridge was a former world title challenger, quite a bit of the ways past it. His prime was probably, closer to probably 2012, 2013, thereabouts. So long in the tooth, but nevertheless, this is only Acousto's second fight. It's a massive challenge to take on and then take out a former world title challenger in 2 rounds in the fashion he did. And he looked good. He looked a lot more poised and composed than from what he did on debut against Michael van Nimwegen, but that's expected. He's got a lot of upside, this kid. I know his team, Lincoln Hudson, Fidel Tuku, are supremely confident and think last night will justify a lot of how they feel about him.
Yeah, he just seems to have it all, and I agree with you. Like, you could see he had the ability in his first fight, but he maybe rushed it a little bit, and as a lot of debutants do, they just want to get the impressive knockout. But I think in this one, he really took his time, and the punches came, and it's a good win, regardless of Berridge's state of his career. I mean, for a second fighter to do this to a fighter like Berridge, and a tough fighter like Berridge. So no matter where he's in his career, he's still tough as nails. So just a great second up performance by him.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we saw a little bit of a more educated right hand from Acousto in this fight too. He brought a nice, real short, sharp right hook early in the fight. Still love to see him pick up the jab and get that jab moving, but I know the training team will be looking to develop those tools in time. He's only 2 fights into his career, so there's plenty of time ahead, and another exciting addition to the sport in this country.
Yeah, 100%, mate. Another, obviously, one of the stalwarts of Australian boxing, especially female boxing. Shannon O'Connell returned last night. First round stoppage of Sarah Higginson. Now, I think we talked about it last week. I think there was no bones made that Sarah Higginson was a world-class fighter who was there to, give Shannon a great hit out. I know for a fact that Sarah was, one of the... and props to Sarah, by the way, for getting in there. But I know that Shannon, they tried to get her all sorts of opponents and just couldn't get one for her. She's obviously coming off the shoulder surgery as well. So, I think it's just one of those fights where you just put it aside, Mike, and you move on to bigger and better things.
If anyone ever deserved the soft hit out in boxing, it's Shannon O'Connell. She's the number 1 contender in the world with 2 sanctioning bodies, coming off a shoulder surgery. She don't need no tough fight. She don't got to prove she can fight. It's just getting her sharp and getting her accustomed to a new team, going through the preparation, and basically using this as a dress rehearsal towards a World Championship challenge. I had no problems with it. If I managed the other girl, there's no way on earth I ever would have put her in the ring with Shannon, but that's not what we're discussing today. Looking at the equation, it is what it is with Shannon. My main takeaways from this were this. As in from this outing, she looked really happy in there. She looked nice and settled with her team. And granted the level of opposition, it's probably the weakest opponent she's fought in quite a few years. But I didn't see any restrictions on her movement. The prior few bouts, she's looked a little bit static. She's looked possibly even overtrained in some of her bouts. So maybe overcompensating with injuries by pushing and striving to go harder and harder. She looked really fresh in the ring yesterday, so it intrigues me to see whether she lands the rematch with Shanika Johnson for the world title, whether it's Ebony Bridges for the 118-pound world title. I'm intrigued to see those fights. I think she's already been in Shanika. I believe she's a better fighter than Ebony, so I would make her favourite. And of all the things, look, a world title is a great honour. In women's boxing, around those particular weight classes, there's ways in which you can cultivate what I'd call softer world championships. You're not needing to walk through Katie Taylor to win a world title at 118, for example. But that said, if there's a girl in Australian boxing history she's been an absolute stalwart of women's boxing in this country for the last decade. If there's a girl that deserves the opportunity to become world champion again and to finally raise that world title above her head, it's Shannon O'Connell. So it was great seeing the shotgun back. Like I said, I'm glad to see her just have that kind of hit out, and now it's on to the serious business.
Yeah, no, I agree, mate. And look, I have spoken to her about it, and I know at the start she was horrified that she saw it almost as a step backwards because she's one of the most stubbornest people you'll ever meet, you know. So, and she had to obviously be convinced that, like you said, look, you're coming off an injury. You've had a lot of tough fights over the last couple of years. New promotional team, new trainers. Let's just get this one under our belt. I don't think she's been in there for maybe 8 or 9 months. So let's just get this one out of the way. Move on. I know she's looking to fight maybe in July or August, I think. So I'm with you. Just get this one out the road and then move on to hopefully bigger and better things. But as I said, she's so hard on herself. One thing I do actually agree with you on is her condition. Like, she's always in great condition, but she didn't look like she'd really push the boundaries like she usually does. And I think it might be a case of train smarter instead of harder. That's sort of the impression that I get.
Yeah, I mean, look, every fighter ages differently, so you can't just throw out generic statements of in your late 30s you have to do this, because there's, especially with women's boxing, estrogen different to testosterone. Some women can peak and overtrain, as I would say, deep into their 30s, 40s, and you don't see a price they pay. Shannon's had a lot of tough, grueling fights, so I think her preparations now need to be really fresh. Just keep her body fresh. She's been injury plagued throughout her career, but again, the kind of athlete and woman she is, she's battled through and pushed through fire time and again. But I think that now it's, you know, as they say, you train smarter, not harder. And I think that if she stays to that motto, we might see a little bit of a renaissance in her career.
And just maybe a little bit of advice for Sarah Higginson for future reference. If you come up against a fighter like Shannon O'Connell, I think probably the worst thing you want to do is put it on her and try and take her out, because I think it was just a recipe for disaster. And Shannon said, I had no choice but to bomb her out of there. So I didn't want to get her out of there in one round. I wanted to get the rounds in. But when someone's throwing bombs at you, no matter what level they are, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to fight back.
She was just out of her class. You know, she might go back, build back up to, like, you know, that national title level, and mix her with some of those girls and improve in time, but also get back to her natural weight class. But I don't think any game plan was going to work last night.
Yeah, that's right. and look, props to her for taking the fight, because no one else would. So full respect to Sarah for getting in there and having a crack. Speaking of having a crack, there's a couple of undercard fights on there as well that I was impressed with. Benjamin Hussein, of course, 8-round decision over Wes Kappa. Benjamin Hussein, of course, the fighter that fought with pretty much half his jaw hanging off his face. Tough guy. And this is probably his best win of his career so far, do you think? And maybe propel him to some bigger things?
Oh, by a long way. By a long way. But in boxing, timing is everything. You know, the timing of this fight was perfect. Wes Kappa, similar to Rob Berridge, his prime years were quite a few years ago. So although he has an exceptionally solid record, he brought a different kind of dynamic to Hussein, which suited Hussein. More of a plotting, more of a relaxed style. Hussein has kind of been drawn into the wrong fights in some of his bouts that were over 4 or 6 rounds with opponents that kind of rushed him and forced him to, I don't know if it's panic under pressure, but just because of a little bit of lack of ring experience, get drawn into scrapping it out when he's got nice boxing skills. I thought with Wes here, Wes sat on the outside long enough, and what surprised me but was impressive was when Hussein was left hand, he just couldn't miss with when he went southpaw stance, he couldn't miss with the straight left hand. Thought he was jabbing really well. He controlled range, landed some really heavy shots down the center, was buckling Wes. And I'd heard, like, earlier career, his team suggests that he's going to excel over 8-10 rounds. And when the kid's had like 3 professional fights, you just think that maybe that kind of mindset's a bit too ambitious. But credit to him, I thought over 8 rounds yesterday, he looked a lot more poised and composed, and definitely the best performance of his career to date.
Yeah, it was, and you're right, some fighters sometimes are better suited to those sort of 8, 10, 12 rounders, but I was impressed as well, and in that division, should have plenty of other opportunities out there as well. I'll tell you what, another young fighter that's impressive as well, Jake Wiley, I think I spelled his name right there, maybe I haven't, stopped Patrick Clark in 4 rounds for his 7th win. Obviously he's switched to Steve Della and Luke Melton as well. Biggest win, of course, was the really impressive win over Dana Coolwell, so this kid's got a pretty big future as well.
Yeah, that was off TV, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
If it was on TV, I missed it, so I apologise. But from all reports, it was a decent scrap while it lasted. I like Jake Wiley. He actually done some rounds the last preparation with Nathaniel May. So we had Cheeky working together with him, and Cheeky said he's a really good kid, good operator. And again, another guy that, is going to keep building, keep developing, and within the next few years is going to make for some great fights domestically.
Yeah, it was in good hands, of course, with Steve Della and Luke Meldon up in Fortitude there. And actually, shout out to Steve Della. I think in the last couple of weeks was inducted to the Queensland Boxing Hall of Fame. So congratulations to that, Steve. He's a great guy. He's a crazy old bugger, but really good bloke and obviously a great trainer as well. So congratulations, Steve, for your induction. On to this week's events, Mike. It is the big one. Mairis Briedis versus Opetai for the IBF Cruiserweight World Title. And watching the press conference today, it's going to be a big one. As Briedis looks in pretty good nick, and looks like they're here to win.
Oh, he definitely. Like I told you last week, he had sparred a couple of times with Floyd Masson. In their final sparring session, Floyd told me that that's the sharpest Briedis was of the 3 sessions. So I think he gradually picked it up. Their team's supremely confident that they're under no illusion that it's an easy fight, but they believe they're going to march down and gradually break Opetai throughout the contest. Without saying it's the biggest challenge and the biggest fight of Opetai's career, but since day one, he's looked like a fighter who's made for this stage. So finally, we get to see it. We discuss fighters reaching these levels. The little part in my head wishes that Jai just had maybe, 2 bridging fights against B-tier former elite fighters just to prepare him a little bit more and condition him for what he's going to face. But I'm a big believer in the kid, and I think obviously it's a huge challenge, but he's got all the capabilities to pull off an upset.
Yeah, he has, and I've been a massive fan for Jai since he turned pro. I mean, I think we said last week Australia's youngest ever Olympian, and just had everything. Power, speed. He's just got it all there in spades, and it's going to be. Look, I think even his team mentioned as well. They actually credited Jai for not targeting just any old world champion. They've targeted the best, and his only loss, of course, was to Alexander Usyk. For the World Cruiserweight title, so there's no doubting this guy's credential. He is the real deal, and I mean, even at 37 years of age, still a very formidable fighter.
He's arguably, like you said, outside of Usyk, arguably he's been the best cruiserweight in the world the last 10 years, and he's beaten a who's list within the division. He's extremely experienced, been experienced since early career. Early career, he actually knocked out Manuel Char at heavyweight, so. I've heard a few people say, even at the press conference, that Jai looked like the bigger guy. Make no mistakes. Weight might be one thing, but, Mairis Briedis is a physical powerhouse, and Jai's got to keep turning him. The one thing I've heard, like the wisdom going into this bout from a lot of people is Briedis either needs to knock him out or Jai needs to win on points. I don't see it that straightforward. I think that Jai's always had a little bit more power than people credit him. And Briedis always possessed a little bit more boxing skill when he's able to bruise and break guys down. He doesn't necessarily need to stop him in order to win a decision, or to win a contest. So I think it's going to be a really intriguing 2-way fight. I think the first 2-3 rounds are going to be imperative. I think Jai needs to get off to an early start, but he also can't expend too much energy. I think that Briedis is going to look to take him to deep waters, and it's going to be up to Jai to really balance the early rounds and then pace himself through the middle to late stages so that he can deal with the late surge of Briedis.
Yeah, and he's going to be there right through the duration, and it's a long way, 12 rounds. Let's get on to today's press conference as we discussed. This is promoter Dean Lonergan.
That Mairis has on his resume is against the current heavyweight champ of the world, the unified heavyweight champ of the world, Alexander Usyk. He lost that fight on points. And it's fair to say that fight was an absolute war like this one's going to be. You'll notice over the next couple of days, Jeff Fennick will come out and start talking about his time with Jai Opetai. He rates Jai as one of the most skilled boxers, if not the most skilled boxer to come out of Australia. And also the one with the granite chin. We know for a fact that Jai, at minimum, this fight's going to go 12 rounds. And I think you're going to see Jai Opetai come to the fore in this fight. Mairis at the moment at 37 years of age has come to the end of his reign. You can't go on forever. And Jai, as he said on a number of occasions, is incredibly hungry. And that hunger is going to it has been feeding him. I can promise you, for the last 6 months, I've never seen Jai in such amazing shape. Once upon a time, he'd come in and he'd have to lose 4 or 5 kilos, 6 kilos sometimes to make weight. He's pretty much on weight now. He used to be gaunt. Now he's looking fit and strong and healthy. It's a credit to a combination of Mark Matthew and Mark Wilson, who've done the conditioning and the boxing work with them. I'm just looking forward to what I think will be an absolute war. I have total confidence in Jai and his ability to come home and bring it home for Australian boxing.
He definitely talks a good fight, doesn't he, Dean? And it's interesting, he did make note that it's going to be 5 years to the day since Jeff Horn beat Manny Pacquiao for the WBO welterweight title in Brisbane. Of course, who could forget that? But he's definitely got faith in his charge, hasn't he? Which I'm sure he has to say. But he's definitely got faith in Jai to take the title.
Well, you wouldn't be putting forth that kind of purse bid on this bout if you didn't have faith in your boxer winning it. Although, Briedis is like $2 million, so it's just on. Think of the pay-per-views you need to sell to cover that price point.
A lot of money.
Think of the government proposals, funding, tickets, everything. It's an uphill battle. It's probably a loss leader. So it just reflects how much faith they actually have in the kid that he's going to pull off the upset. The thing is, it'd be a minor upset because we've all known since day dot the capabilities that Jai Opetai possesses. He's a guy that was pegged from, very, very early, even amateur career on the international stage. From when he made the national team at 17 years of age, a lot of people just said, he was possibly the most gifted and most talented fighter on that team. And that's a team that possessed guys the likes of Jeff Horn. So his journey's taken a little bit longer to get there, but it's also probably worked to his advantage because his body's matured. And yourself, up at heavyweight, up at cruiserweight, especially real fast-handed, skillful guys, they usually don't peak at 20 years of age. So think that he's been given the right kind of time to mature and fill out into his body. And, it's an exciting fight. I really think that, anyone that asks us in the industry about this fight, I think it's essentially our job to tell them, firstly, what the credentials of Briedis are. Like I said last week, he's undoubtedly one of the top 5 guys, one of the top 5 fighters to enter Australia in the last decade in terms of credentials. But the other thing is too, stylistically, this is just going to be a cracking fight. You've got a marauding puncher, high work rate puncher against a real skillful, slippery southpaw who likes to hold his feet, can punch a little bit. Like I said, the guy who's the power puncher and has a high work rate actually can box a little bit, knows how to slip and dip and roll with shots. It's just a fascinating style matchup.
Should be. Well, let's hear from both fighters. Firstly, Jai Opetai.
A long time for this opportunity. And, man, I can't wait. I feel ready. I know he's a great fighter, but, I feel I'm the new generation of great coming through. All he's done, that's all in the past now. It's my time now.
And what makes you so firm in that belief? I interviewed you last week, and I've never seen you so forthright in your opinion and your confidence. What has got you to this point?
I've done everything right. I've done my apprenticeship, and, July 2nd I come certified. I've done all the hard work. Everything's done. And I'm ready to walk in there.
Tell me about the desire that you see in your opponent, and the desire that you think you have to win this fight.
Man, I know this is a big step up from my, past competition, but, my last fights, I blew them out the water. You know what I mean? It was I shown every time I was in the ring that I was levels above. I was on that world stage level. And I'm just excited to get in there and, show everyone.
They could have dodged this fight. They could have gone another route, and certainly they didn't have to come to Australia. Do you think you're being underestimated in this fight?
I definitely think I've been underestimated in a way, but I know he's training hard. He's ready. He's been up the top for a long time, and his coach is smart. They know not to underestimate me. You know what I mean? I'm coming for that belt, but we're ready. We've done the hard work. I'm ready for this fight. I'm ready to become a world champion.
More, but. I don't know how I feel in the ring, how he feels in the ring. Like Mike Tyson said, all the plans change after one punch through the head, and we will see what kind of fight we make after the first round. We need to feel each other. And then we dancing and punching and do everything in the ring. Yeah, all the best.
When you've looked to the fight,
just cut it there. It's probably didn't get a lot out of that, unfortunately, because he had a little bit of trouble with everything. But one thing I will say about both guys, Briedis looked cool, calm, collected. He knows he's been there many times before. I don't think it really matters what's been thrown at him from the Opetai team or Dean Lonergan or wherever. He knows he's just here and nothing's really going to faze him. And then on the other hand, you've also got Jai Opetai, who makes no qualms about the magnitude of what's in front of him, and he looks ready to go. So I'm with you. I just think it's just going to be a hell of a fight where you've got the master as the champion and the up-and-comer with Jai. So I think if anyone's debating whether to pay the $60, I think don't hesitate, pay it.
They're both unbelievably calm. I think that's usually in these bigger fights. Like I said, there's a contrast in styles, but usually at a press conference, there's a contrast in personalities. But you weren't going to have a lot of tit for tat or banter between the two parties because they're both just very calm and cerebral. And I think that the fight, like I said, with this mix and blend of skills, the fight sells itself. And I just hope that the public come out and support these type of events because, like we were saying earlier with Liam Wilson, we need the big fights on our shores. History reflects that the chances of the Australian athlete or the home athlete winning, go up seismically, increase seismically when the fight is staged in their home country. So the more big fights we can bring to Australia, the greater probability of our guys winning, retaining and maintaining world championship status.
Yeah, I agree. I think I said last week, the only downside of this fight, it's almost been lost in the middle of the Cambosis event and what's going to be the Zoo event, which apparently is going to be announced in the next few days as well. So I just hope, like you, that it hasn't got all the controversy and the shoving at the press conference and all that sort of stuff that we've seen in the others. But yeah, if you're a true fan that just loves pure boxing without all the crap that goes with it, this is the fight. The undercard too, mate, I must say, is going to be a really, really good card as well. Obviously, it's headlined by the return of the head splitter, Isaac Harman and Bo Hartis. It's over 10 rounds at middleweight. Before I let you comment there, I'll just get the fighters on. Firstly, let's hear from Bo Hartis.
Turn it up. I can't say how grateful I am to be on the best card in Australia this year. So, yeah, thank you very much to everyone involved. But, really excited. And with an opponent like Isaac, he comes to bang and can fight. So, yeah, I'm ready to go and keen for a good fight to put on.
What do you think happens in this fight? We've all seen Isaac Harman a great deal. Not too many have seen too much of you, but obviously you come with confidence. What happens here?
Mate, yeah, a bit of a surprise package. I can box, I can bang. I've got pretty good feet, pretty smart. I'll go wherever it needs to go and very confident of getting the win here. I trained my ass off for this, so let's go.
Mike, we obviously know a fair bit about Isaac Harman. I must admit, I don't really know much about Hartis except he's 6-1. I think is he with 4 KOs. I think I read that right.
Yeah, pretty tough kid. Not a real flashy boxer. Not a slickster by any stage. Not an all-out banger. He's just kind of a boxer brawler, if anything. It's going to be an interesting fight. Very game, very tough kid, very durable, and I think this is about that if it was made, say, towards the tail end of last year, it wouldn't have been perceived as being overly interesting. I think that Hardman was considered to be on a different trajectory, but now coming off of a second-round stoppage defeat to Michael Zarafa, I think that there is a lot of question marks on how he's going to return, and Hartis is the fitting kind of opponent to go in there and test him.
Yeah, well, speaking of the head splitter, let's hear what he has to say.
It's been good. It's great to be back on Foxtel. I've been here since 2019, and that's how I got all my traction. And I jumped off the platform to go fight on a website, and that didn't go well. But it's good to be back here in a press conference that's organised, and me and my coach are excited. We don't have to fight our way out of this venue like last time. So press been good, sparring's been good. I'm just excited to get in with Bo over there. Dean said if I was going to carry on like I normally do, and I can't actually fault Bo. You know, I had a look at him. There's not much on him, but I searched Facebook and I seen him punching down 6 VBs in 60 seconds. You know, in 2012, and you know he's got a sick mullet back then. Now he's got a ratty. You know, I can't knock this bloke. I will Saturday, unfortunately, but I'm sure I will share a few VBs after too. So I'm excited to be back here on this stellar card. You know, I got Jai over there. I look up to Jai, and soon to be new world champion Mairis. You know, star-studded, top to bottom. You know, there's Taylor Robson, Dana Coolwell's on as well. So you know, it's unreal. Cohen, Mazudia as well. It's a great card to be a part of.
He always brings it, doesn't he, Isaac? He never disappoints, and he couldn't help but have a little bit of a dig at the last event where he obviously, like he said, he had to fight his way out of the press conference and got in the scuffle there. But one thing he brings is the excitement, doesn't he? And just the drama and whatever else you want to throw in there.
Well, his team had a choice in the matter. They could have countered the offer so he didn't have to fight on, as he said, quote unquote, a website. So that's on his team ultimately. But yeah, he's a great entertainer. He actually sounds a little bit humbled here, which is interesting. I think that you want the crazy part about the sport out here is when guys are vocal and outspoken, everyone says they've got to be more humble. And then when they all just give the one fight at a time, I'm going to go in there and give my best, we all talk about how boring they are. I like the fact that we've got characters like Isaac Harman. Did you notice he cited Cohen Mazudia there, but he said nothing about Joel Camilleri because they had an internet beef a while ago. So
that's right.
I think he hasn't forgotten about his disdain for Mr. Kamakao either.
Was it Camel Toe, I think he called him. So look, that's one thing I like about, and the good thing is, I think I would love to actually to see him and Joel actually fight because I think it'd be pretty entertaining either at press conference and online and everything else. But look, I'm with you. You need characters like these guys in the sport, and you know, and you said about being humble. Well, getting destroyed in 2 rounds, you know, in front of a lot of people online and at the venue will probably do that to you. But I really like that he's backed up. He paid respect to Bo Hartis, of course, for taking the fight, and who knows, maybe if he gets a nice KO win in this one, maybe the old Isaac will return. But sometimes, you know, getting destroyed in 2 rounds in front of everyone will bring you back to earth with a bit of a thud. But I'm a fan of Isaac and really hope he gets back to where he was and, you know, moves on to some bigger and better things. Let's go to the rest of the undercard, mate. Just quickly, we'll cover the fights. You mentioned Dana Coolwell. He's fighting Ladrada there for I think it's a 8-round featherweight fight. There it is, 8 rounds featherweight.
Yeah, Coolwell coming down in weight.
Is he? Okay.
He always looked like he was maybe just slightly soft at 130, 135 when he fought there, but still a slight surprise to me that he's coming down to featherweight, but apparently he's been reducing quite well, and we'll see how he looks. I think Ladrada's the right kind of opponent to test the waters.
Do you know much about Ladrada at all, or?
Yeah, just a typical spoiling South American. Not a lot of power or that. Not real speedy, but just a spoiling style. I think Dana should be a little bit too nifty and sharp for him. Do
you think it's strange that they've brought in someone from South American? I'm sure there could have been a featherweight around these regions, couldn't there, or not?
It's hard. You're overestimating how much depth and how much volume there is out here. Yeah. You know, a lot of the guys out here, I know I'm not going to name any names because all I'm going to do is just explode their prices through the roof. But I know how many of the guys that have, you know, just your regular records that would cost $5,000 in the States. In Australia, they're wanting like $20,000 a fight. So sometimes it's actually just cheaper just to book in an international and pay what you got to pay.
I've just probably got my promoter's hat on there where I'm thinking airfares, accommodation, visas, food, all that sort of stuff, and US dollars and all that sort of stuff exploding. But yeah, you're right. Maybe I'm overestimating what we have here because, you know, as we've talked about in other fights, it's sometimes not easy just to find someone local. Another fight on the undercard I'm really looking forward to is this one, Faris Chevalier, Connor Wallace. WBA Oceania light heavyweight title. Now, this is a really good matchup. I'm not quite sure it'll be the most exciting fight in the world because Faris is not really in those types of fights. But I think just for both fighters, for what they bring, I think it should be a really evenly matched fight.
It'll be a really good technical shootout. That's how I see it. I think that it's going to maybe take 2 or 3 rounds for the bout to warm up and see how it's going to materialise. I think that, Connor Wallace had that loss to Letty, but he's a much better fighter than that. He's got good skills from the outside. I think Farris been working to make adjustments to keep enhancing his infighting game with Lim Jekka. And I think that, this is a great chance again for him to showcase and represent what exquisite skills and tools he can bring to the sport. So I think you have to lean towards Farris in this encounter, but it is in Connor Wallace's backyard. Connor's a guy that I think pressure fighting is potentially the style that can throw him in a loop a little bit, make him panic a bit. Farris isn't necessarily that kind of fighter. So if it's a real technical battle, technical shootout, it might come down to who's more accurate and who's more consistent with their work.
Yeah, it should be a good one. Another one we just spoke about before is Joel Camilleri, Cohen Mazzudia, the rematch for the WBA Oceania and WBC Australasian Super Welterweight title. Now, Mazzudia got the nod in the first fight, which was on a no limit show. So obviously now the rematch.
Yeah, it was in New South Wales. I thought that was controversial. I didn't think it was particularly Joel Camilleri's best night at the office. So I think his training camp leading into that fight probably resembled the opening scenes of Rocky 3, where I just think he was, it's in the midst of COVID. He's doing a bit of training in New South Wales, a bit in Victoria, wasn't with his local coach. His corner was just a congregation of different elite coaches thrown together, and it didn't work. I think that he's had a much more settled campaign for this one to avenge the loss. Let's just hope he gets a fair shake from the judges.
Yeah, I remember watching the last one. As I said, that was on the No Limit show. But just watching, I just got the impression that Joel, and I'm sure he's learnt by it, I just got the impression he went in there and almost, because he'd been on a bit of a roll, he almost expected it to just roll on and just do what he had to do and get the win. Mazzudia, of course, had been stopped by Wade Ryan, so not great form. And I just think Joel might have went in there, as I said, expecting it to happen rather than making it happen. And I just don't think he'll make the same mistake this time. And I think he'll have enough class to get by Mazzudia.
Yeah, I thought also in that fight he was just doing awkward, unorthodox things that weren't productive to win in rounds. There's ways in which you can do the same things, and then when the other guy closes range, just pick your hands up, stab a jab in his face. Whereas I thought that he allowed, some of the rounds he allowed Mazzudia to be the more active fighter, even though I thought that Joel was still out finessing him and landing the cleaner shots. Maybe the judges were just favouring, the fact they thought he was getting out hustled in the round. So he's got to control centering. If he does that, he should win this fight comfortably.
Yeah, I think last time from memory, he allowed Mazzudia to actually probably dictate terms more than he would have liked. And I think if he just gets his groove back, and really, no doubt he'll take the fight seriously. And as you said, he'll have his proper trainers in his corner at this time. I think he'll get the job done over Mazzudia, and hopefully, who knows, get that fight with Isaac Harman, which would be awesome. Now to round out the card, another really good young up and comer, Taylor Robertson, is fighting for the IBF World Youth title against Jocelyn Fernandez. Now, first of all, Mike, I've had a few people ask me this. Can you explain what a youth title actually is, please?
IBF, I think it used to be under 25, so I'm going to say it's still under 25, but they might have, I know one of the youth, I think the WBC was under 23, the IBF was under 25, but it could be the opposite now, so don't quote me on that. But it's, essentially if you're under that age group, usually a title of that nature will put you in the world top 15 within 1 or 2 defenses of it. So it's a good belt to win on the build up to something bigger.
Okay. So has it got to do with fights as well, or it's just the age?
Just the age, but also the level of fight. So you've got to fight credible opposition for it.
Yeah.
But both contestants need to be under the age. The irony is, there was a kid I managed years ago called Darnell Wilson, who was like 36, and the IBF approved him to fight Chad Dawson for the World Youth title. But if he was victorious, obviously he couldn't claim the title. It was only available for Dawson. So sometimes they bend the rules a little bit.
Bend the rules. They'll still take the sanctioning money though. That'll never stop them. But
no. Well, look. That's what it's all about for these organisations.
Yeah.
That's how they flourish.
Hey,
That's how they exist.
It is a business, so I understand that. Now, Taylor Robinson, she's been really active. She obviously lost to Shannon O'Connell late last year, but she's returned this year, and her last fight, I think, was only a month or so ago on the Cambosa's Haney undercard. So you've got to respect these fighters like that are just fronting up month after month.
Yeah, well, I formerly managed Taylor, so I knew what her capabilities was. Yeah, she's got a lot of natural talent. She's got a lot of natural skill. Hopefully, we start to see more of that come to the forefront in these kind of fights. I think when she's in with opposition that have the intent to come and roll her, it might bring out the best in her. Force all of her skills to come to the forefront, because she's got a really good countering game. She's not the most comfortable when she needs to be out there to dictate and set the pace and stalk her opponents. But from what I know of this opponent, I think this opponent's going to chase and follow her a bit, and that'll probably bring Taylor's best skills out to light.
Well, and she also fought Shannon O'Connell, I think, in her 4th or 5th fight, and gave Shannon a really good fight. So, obviously she's got all the tools as well to go on. So hopefully she wins this, and there's some good fights out there for her, of course, all the women at this stage, some massive opportunities for them out there. So good luck to Taylor on that one. Let's go on to some world news, mate, because probably not a hell of a lot going on. I think there's a lot on the horizon, but not actually being confirmed. I just want to quickly go over, we announced this, of course, last week, that the Canelo Golovkin 3 was confirmed for the T-Mobile Arena. They've had the press conferences this week. They had 2, one in LA and one in New York. You can see there, thanks to Fight Hub TV for getting there and getting the vision for us. So we'll give them a bit of credit. Hopefully they don't bar us from YouTube. But what did you make of the press conferences, Mike? I actually took out that one is that Canelo's not a happy camper at the moment. He's not a big fan of Triple G, and I think Triple G took it all in his stride and almost had a bit of fun with it all.
I think that Triple G was the one that you would have felt was irritated and frustrated, given that he's needed to wait so long. He feels that he was wrong in both contests. Mm-hmm. So, it's a little bit of a surprise the way Canelo was reacting. I don't read too much into it, but Triple G does look cool as a cucumber, and he's going to need to be on his game and to find the way to victory in this bout.
I must admit, one thing that did surprise me a lot with Triple G is he somehow along the line forgot how to speak English. he had a translator for both press conferences.
Yeah, maybe he just got tired. Maybe he just got tired of needing to try and communicate and just reverted back to his lazy mentality. Maybe like Canelo, he's specialised in learning 8 swear words in English and only has another 50 words in his vocabulary.
Yeah, well, it's funny because Triple G's always spoken English, and Canelo's probably been the one that's never spoken Spanish, and now it's obviously been reversed. But look, maybe Triple G, maybe he couldn't quite get out there what he wanted to say himself, so he said stuff, but I'll just get the translator to get it out there, and he can just make stuff up as he goes. But I thought that was one of the interesting things. But one of the big things to announce with this fight, Mike, is that I think I mentioned last week that I was going over to cover it. Well, I've just found out that one of our co-hosts, Grant Tassie Brown, is going to make the trip with me. So both of us are going to be there to cover the fight. I just hope Las Vegas is ready for Tassie Brown, Mike.
Las Vegas is never ready for Tassie Brown. So I think that he's going to bring all kinds of chaos to town. But look, now that he's getting a little bit older, I think he's settled enough where, if it's only for a weekend, Las Vegas might be able to cope. It's still a question mark, but it's great that both of you are going to be there. There's nothing like a big fight in Vegas. The only, really to me, it's either got to be Vegas or Madison Square Garden, the big arena, Madison Square Garden. There's nothing like being in those two locations.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we plan to, I think we're going to get there a week or just over a week before the fight, and we'll probably, we'll obviously cover it day by day. I doubt we'll get any interviews or that sort of stuff, but we're going to do our best to maybe sneak into the press centre. We might just make up something and try and get in there. I think that's Tassie's strength. I'm sure he'll make up something. Eddie Hearn's his new best mate, so maybe he might hook us up and get us some decent seats and get us in the press area. But either way, we'll update everyone every day. We'll be sending back as much vision as we can. We might do a bit of a wrap each day, Tassie and I, about what's going on, and maybe answer any questions that anyone has out there. So look out for that. It's the Boxing Deep Dive show on the road, September 17th, Canelo and Triple G. The other fight we also announced the venue last week, Mike, was the Usyk-Joshua fight. They've also had their first press conference. The only thing I sort of took out of it was that Usyk would have preferred to be anywhere else beside this press conference. And Joshua, I don't know why he needs to have his headphones at every opportunity, but apart from that, I didn't really take anything out of it.
I took out of it that Usyk needs a haircut.
Yeah, he loves that hair, doesn't he?
Yeah. What I took out of it was more of the same. I think Usyk's always going to be a quirky character that almost seems miscast at the absolute height of the sport. As a heavyweight king and champion of the world, shared honour with Tyson Fury. Let's not get that mixed up. And I think that with Joshua, you're hearing all the right things. He's saying all the right things. Is he going to be able to bring some different energy with Robert Garcia as head trainer? I'm not sure. Robert's an outstanding trainer. If there was anybody that's capable of turning around the result, it's Robert Garcia, preparing him for camp, preparing him for war. I'm still not sure. I'm still a huge backer of Usyk in this fight. I think, look, and you said Usyk seemed, disinterested, maybe would have rather been anywhere else. That's his temperament. He's a bizarre, quirky kind of guy, but a very affable, lovable guy. And you got to remember, too, you can't discount what's ongoing in the Ukraine right now. And he would be very conscious of the fact that he don't want to be over-exuberant when he knows what kind of chaos is going on back home.
Yeah, good point, actually. Yeah, of course, he's not going to be his probably normal flamboyant self when he's got obviously some issues, more than a few issues back home. So, but yeah, look, I'm with you. I'm not sure whether Joshua's got the ability to change it, although he might have said the same thing after the Ruiz fight. Anything can happen, but I just think Usyk's a bit of a different beast to Ruiz, because at least Usyk's going to turn up 100% in shape, physically and mentally. Whereas Ruiz,
I was going to say, Usyk hasn't forgotten to train for 6 months.
Yeah, and party and everything like that. So I'm with you, man. What are we, a couple of months out from the fight? I don't think that Joshua has the ability to change. But as you said, with Robert Garcia in his corner, there's probably no one else that would be in a better place to actually get him to the line. But I suppose all will be revealed. So yeah, what's that? 20th of August there. So big things happening there for that one. Mate, I've got some talking points I want to get to. That's obviously it for the Aussie news and world news. I've got just a few things I want to throw at you, whether they're long answers, short answers, whatever. I just want to throw, I think I've got 6 or 7 different ones. A lot of them actually relate to some of the things we've discussed tonight, but if we can elaborate a little bit more on them. The first one is, I want to put this to you. By having the rugby fight on there, and you would have noticed I didn't mention it because it wasn't worth mentioning, a no limit just in a little bit of a risk of hurting the brand that they've worked really hard to build up and have so much respect. And I'm only raising this because there was a lot of comments last night on social media that really slammed No Limit, where normally with a No Limit show, all you're hearing is praise.
I think people are just tired of the gimmicks. I think more than anything, that's what we're seeing. That it's just people tune in. Like what I've always argued is, if the gimmicks are paying the bills and bringing the spotlight, say a Gallen headlining whatever, Gallen's creating opportunities for another 10, 12 fighters on the undercard.
Yeah.
I think that last night, you don't know what that brought in media rights. So it's probably a question best kind of presented to the likes of Matt and George Rose. I think as genuine boxing fans, we don't want to see it every event. We don't want to see these gimmicky kind of fights that are the road to nowhere. I thought last night's bout with Hodges and Hannett was a fun contest. As a purist of the sport, it's not what you want to see on every event, and I think it's not something that you want to see as part of the chain of command, that the fabric of every event needs to contain something that's going to hit social media outlets in a different way. But if it's contributing to the economy of the shows, then it is what it is. It's working towards a greater good of the sport.
Yeah, I'm actually with you. I just sort of brought it up again, as I said, because of the comments I saw on social media. But I'm with you. I think what was good about this one is that the fight I know it was sort of put out there as one of the main attractions, but it wasn't. You had obviously Liam Wilson as the main event. They put Shannon out there a fair bit as well, and I thought that was really good. It was sort of just a fight on the card, which I thought was good. And I'll be honest with you, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, I've seen a hell of a lot worse fights and undercards before than that one.
Look, I'll say this to all the fans out there. If you go to Fight TV and you book one of these cards it's out of Tennessee or Georgia or any of those Midwestern states in the United States, Florida, where there's soft commissions, and you watch the undercard bouts, the first 5 or 6 bouts will be worse than anything you'll watch on Fox Sports over the next 10 years. I can assure you of that.
Yeah, no, I think we've got it pretty good here. And as I said, I don't think it was the most graceful and technical fight ever, but I thought they both brung it. And on with you, especially when it comes to the pay-per-views. And you would have seen that in the last show, of course, with Paul Gallen. They actually called on him when the Opetai fight got cancelled. Fox main event needed a pay-per-view, and the first person they called was Paul Gallen, and he stepped up and delivered. And of course, they had the other fighters on the undercard, but you've got to deliver for what you're asking for. Another talking point. Liam Wilson. Now we obviously spoke about him earlier in there. What's next for him? If you're managing Liam Wilson, are you stepping him up again, or are you just stepping him to the side with a similar type of opponent? He's only had 12 fights now. What sort of pace would you be putting him on at the moment?
Well, you're asking me a complicated question because you asked me if I'd manage him, what I'd do. But I work for Pro Bellum, and we've got the #1 contender in the world in the WBO named Archie Sharp. So I'm going to say him and Archie Sharp should fight each other and look to secure the mandatory spot for the World Championship, because there's a high probability that Shakur Stevenson's going to step up in weight within a year. And you might end up in a position to fight for a vacant world title. So I would say that, look, Archie's 22-0 with 9 knockouts. It's actually what I'd consider a genuine 50-50 type fight. I think something like that works. As for Wilson, whatever his team decides, I think that once you get to those points, you just got to look to stay active. If they don't want that kind of opportunity, just keep him busy against good opponents that are going to keep contributing to building his skill set.
Now, he's going to be ranked in probably the top 3 or 4, whatever it might be. I know you've got to be sometimes careful to get involved in these conversations, but do you actually think he's at that level yet and ready for that type of competition? From what I saw, I'll answer it.
Depends who's in the rankings.
Yeah.
It depends who's in the rankings. I've had guys that won world titles that pound for pound in their weight class probably weren't in the top 6 or 7 fighters in the weight class when they won the world title, but timing's everything. And sometimes timing's your friend and sometimes timing's a bitch. Yeah. But it's just, you got to play the luck of the draw. And if the luck of the draw can fall their way, they've got to take the opportunities.
Yeah, well, you're right. If you don't take the opportunity while it's there, well, it might not ever come again. And I just would have thought, I was really impressed with Liam last night, but I just think there's still a few areas I would like to see him maybe get another 2, 3, even 4 fights, even 5 fights before he stepped up. But again, if the opportunities come, you're going to take them. And I think the commentator said last night he might be in the top 2 or 3 now with, I've lost myself there, with one of the organisations. So either way, I was just interested to see what your next move with him would be, even though it's going to be a pretty big future for Liam because he's such a great talent. Next one. Can Isaac Harman get back to Zarafa? So obviously he was at the level before the Zarafa fight. Has he got what it takes to get back to that point?
I'm not sure. This might sound harsh, but I think he's a kid that thrives so much on that belief that he could march through walls that it's going to be a look and see to see how he mentally bounces back. I actually, unlike other people, I preferred the version of Isaac Hardman on the way up than what I saw the last 4 or 5 fights. I thought that he was trying to pick his shots and box a little bit too much. I liked that awkward aggression. He was coming out early. He was a little high, maybe a bit of a kickboxer stance, maybe people felt, but he was catching guys and flattening them, and we weren't seeing that for a stretch of a few bouts there. He was such a physically strong kid and so much belief, and I liked his pressure. I think that he added some nuances to his game, but I think the fighter he was in his first 8-9 fights would have given Zarafa more trouble than the guy that boxed him that was just a little bit too conventional and predictable and reckless with the combination of those things. Let's see. I hope he can get back because he's great for the sport out here, but time will be the biggest factor. I'm just not sure if that confidence will ever be fully restored unless he goes through a really solid rebuild.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have thought the rematch would probably happen. You'd think Zarafa will either be moving on to bigger and better things or maybe even out of the sport by the time that Isaac's back there. But, I mean,
exactly.
Time will tell. The next one, mate, Jai Opetai. Again, we've spoken about his fight coming up. If he wins, what awaits Jai Opetai on the world stage as far as opportunity goes and paydays?
World's his oyster. World's his oyster, because if he wins, and he wins better than 7-5, he's done something that even the heavyweight king couldn't do in Usyk. So the world is his absolute oyster. I would think that his team would look to build his profile. Maybe they could secure a really solid funding grant from the Samoan government and bring the first ever world title bout to Samoa. I think that would be something unbelievable to see and witness. And the good part at Cruiserweight, in just voluntary defenses, the fights aren't going to cost you a lot. You know, you can get your opponents anywhere from, say, 60 to 75,000, 100,000 max US. So he would have the opportunity to do something like that. I wouldn't be surprised, win, lose, draw, whatever, to see Jai move up to heavyweight in the next 18 months.
Even if he does win, do you see him maybe staying cruiserweight for 2 or 3 defences and then maybe taking the plunge like Usyk and going to heavyweight?
Heavyweight pays the bills. Look at the history of the cruiserweight weight class. Every single significant fighter throughout the history of cruiserweight has tested the waters up at heavyweight. If you think about it, from Holyfield, eventually Dwight Cowie, after losing to Holyfield, the only one really was Carlos De Leon, that really, when he was just finished. But he was never the man. But everyone that's been the man, you know, Al Cole was near unbeatable at cruiserweight, moved up to heavyweight to fight Tim Witherspoon, got 3 times more than he ever earned for a cruiserweight title, fighting Witherspoon in just a 10-round bout at heavyweight. So that's the allure that's there from David Hay, another one, moved up. Thomas Adamek. The list goes on and on. Steve Cunningham went up, tested the waters against Tyson Fury. There's, you know, that's history usually reflects the future. So conventional wisdom says if Jai wins this world championship, he might make a couple defenses and then eye something significant in heavyweight.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it's right from the dawn of time. Cruiserweights has been one of those wasteland type of divisions, hasn't it? Where there's never been a lot of money there. I'm thinking, was it maybe Holyfield De Leon might have been probably the biggest cruiserweight fight of all time? I don't know. I haven't sort of followed it for a while, the cruiserweight division. What do you think?
Holyfield Cowie would have been the biggest. I mean, that was that was an Olympic medalist facing a multi-division world champion.
De Leon was for a unified title, though, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, and De Leon was always a guy that was just more like a transitional champion. You know, I think he was 4-time world champion, WBC world champion only WBC, because you know he would win, make a defense, and then just have an indifferent performance. But that fight, I think Holyfield Cowie. I think Mairis Briedis was a massive fight. James Toney, Vasily Girov was a massive fight. Adamek and Steve Cunningham. It's just there's nothing that you've ever really looked at in the history of the division that you just say, wow, that was a huge box office fight. I mean, if you're talking box office attraction, maybe David Hay, Enzo Macronelli, that unification, because it was such a big fight in UK boxing. You know, you had England versus Wales. You had a huge rivalry there. Both camps, you know, were at each other's throats in the lead up. Good banter leading in, but still, David Hay needed to go to heavyweight to land the real paydays. So, like you said, it's been a bit of a wasteland, but it's a necessary weight class between light heavy to heavy. And hopefully for Jai Opetai, he'll be having these kind of discussions in a few months because he's king of the world.
Yeah, let's just hope he gets the belt and he can obviously then make his own decisions. A couple more to get through, mate. Will Ebony Bridges take the challenge? If you're her manager or Eddie Hearn, apologies to Ebony, I've spelled her name wrong there. Do you take the fight with Shannon? Or will she take the fight with Shannon? What's your opinion?
I'm not sure. Ebony seems kind of steadfast in wanting to remain in the UK. She's one of those Aussies that's not particularly interested in a huge homecoming fight unless it seems the event is structured around her. Look, when you've got the championship, that's a collateral. So, the question on this should be, can Shannon O'Connell have her team push the IBF to enforce the World Championship fight? If she can do that, then it doesn't matter whether she wants to take the challenge or not. She's got no choice.
Yeah. Well, she's obviously got the first tick. She's the #1 challenger, and that's what's great about her being with No Limit now, is that they will obviously push the issue with the IBF. But yeah, it's interesting. Well, I would love to see it, especially if the Jarvis Paro fight is a success. That Eddie looks to maybe bring that to headline maybe his next show, because it would make a hell of a lot of sense, and especially on the back of some of the other big women's fights that have happened. And
I'm sure if they're both paid accordingly, it will happen 100%.
All right. Well, hopefully for Australian boxing and obviously the girls that comes about. A couple more. What do we got there? Can Acousto beat the record? He's made no secret that he wants to beat Jeff Fennick's record. Jeff won his world title in his 7th fight. In this day and age, can that be done?
Genuine world title, no. No. How's he going to beat Bivol or Better Beav, or then even say David Benavidez goes up? How's he going to beat these guys in 6 fights? No.
Yeah, I agree.
Can you manufacture something like an IBO world title that's not really a world title? Yeah. I think you could manufacture that. WBC, WBA, IBF, WBO, I can't see it. Love to be wrong, but I can't see it happening.
Do you see him actually being a player in that division at some stage against those guys?
If he keeps on the trajectory, yeah, definitely. I mean, look, in the Olympic qualifiers, he rolled what was then the world #2 and beat another fighter ranked in the world top 10. So, usually guys, especially around light heavyweight, that have those types of results leading into an Olympic Games have a lot of upside as a professional. It's not like you don't have the depth at light heavyweight that you have in a lot of other weight classes from that, say, top 10 to top 50 point. The top 10 at light heavy is extremely solid, but that level below, I could see him fitting in there really fast. Yeah, definitely he can be a factor. I just think needs to build his experience, bide his time. We're in an era where the light heavyweights, there's a weakness in getting to the dance, but the guys at the head of the table, you don't want to mess with them. Bivol and Beterbiev are just, two exceptionally difficult fights for any fighter historically.
Yeah, well, so far, I mean, it's only 2 fights, but he's definitely shown he's got the potential there. I've got 2 more for you, mate, and they relate to the same 2 people. I'm referring to George Kambosos and Tim Tszyu. What's the bigger fight this year? I put it on a Talking Boxing show the other night, and I don't really like to do this, of course, because they're both massive fights. What's bigger, Tszyu versus Charlo or Kambosos Haney 2?
Tszyu versus Charlo.
Yeah.
No one outside of Kambosos' camp would believe that there could be a different outcome of that fight on repeat, whereas Tim Tszyu, he's really entering the unknown. We documented this the other day. Like, we all kind of factor in and might gauge what we believe to be his ceiling, but until we see him at the big dance, we could either be fools, we could be geniuses. We'll find out on that particular night, and that's the exciting part. He's done everything he's needed to date. He's unbeaten. Like I noted, he's beaten 1 former world champion and 3 former world title challengers. He's ticked all the right boxes. He's earned this shot. Yeah, he's a huge underdog, but he's going in there filled with belief. I think, to me, that's a hell of a lot more interesting than seeing a repeat of a fight that was relatively one-sided.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting too, because they could probably land almost around the same time, which would be really interesting for Australian boxing.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, we're in a pretty decent era right now. There's a lot of things I'd love to see adjusted, but in terms of the fights that we've been seeing on this shore and where Australian fighters are landing in, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, it certainly is, mate. Either way, as I said, I don't really want to throw it up as a pick. I know it's hard to choose, but it's interesting that, both of those fights are going to land at the same time for undisputed world championships. It's just awesome. I've got one more for you as it relates to these guys. They've had a bit of a spat in the media about this. Tszyu or Kambosos, who's the bigger draw?
Tszyu.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Tszyu. Kambosos.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Kambosos out of sight, out of mind too long.
Yeah.
Wasn't profiled, wasn't built in Australia. So he got profiled massively on the fact he won the big dance against Teofimo, but I think now with a little bit of the public's let down from the build-up leading into and then the outcome of the Haney bout, I think his star power has dwindled somewhat, whereas Zoo's star power is still very firm and solid.
And Zoo's such a renowned name in Australian boxing, even though he's not an Australian boxer. The Zoo name, this is Costa I'm talking about, not Tim. Of course, he was born here, but the Zoo name is so revered in Australian boxing. We all loved Costa, and then now we obviously love Tim, we love Nikita. None of them have ever been controversial. I've never said anything that could be construed as disrespectful or whatever, and I think that's the Australian ways. We love fighters like that are great fighters but don't really get involved in all that other shit. They just tell it the way it is, where I know Kambosos has really riled a few of the Aussie fans up with his and his dad's performances at press conferences and weigh-ins and that sort of stuff. So the only reason I asked is because I think it was put to George Kambosos about who the bigger draw was, and he actually took a little bit of offence to it. He said, I got 41,000, what Zoo got. But I'm with you. I actually see the other way, that I think if it come down to it, if they fought on the same night, which fight are you going to watch on main event? I think the Zoo would get the nod.
Doesn't matter what you get in the stadium. Look at the longevity of both guys out here. I think you've got to look at who moves the needle more on the day-to-day beyond just one event. I think that it's Zoo, and that's not to disparage Kambosos. What he's achieved is unbelievable, and we can't forget that. It shouldn't. We shouldn't even be looking to pit them against each other. But if you lay the question out there, I just think Tim is the bigger draw card. If Tim has a similar outcome that George had with Haney, I don't know. Maybe fans will lose interest in Tim. But now, because he's really a star on the rise, he's got this groundswell of support. And like you said, being a second-generation fighter to an absolute legend who based his entire career in Australia, it's definitely given him a huge vehicle to success.
And I think, too, if the Zoo-Charlo fight was in Australia and it was hyped up as much as the Kambosos fight was, I've got a feeling Sydney or even Melbourne, I think that he would probably supersede the Kambosos crowd. So, but either way, look, again, I'm just sort of putting it out there. I see sometimes things in the news or on social media that is worth a discussion. And as I said, I did see this one where it was a little bit of and the media, of course, play on it, a little bit of a rift between George and Tim. I don't think there's a rift there. I know they obviously, George was obviously trained by Igor as well. But, I mean, I've talked to the Zoo team, and I don't think they hold any animosity towards George. It's just that they parted the ways. But I know it was put to George about the Kambosos, about the drawing power with Zoo, and he did take offence at it. So, as I said, I just wanted to hear your opinion.
Yeah, well, look, they've always been a little bit sensitive, that camp. So it is what it is. I particularly like George a lot, and I don't mind his father either, but I can see why so many people feel offset, because they're sensitive, and sometimes questions come your way that you might feel a little bit disrespectful, but you have an opportunity to turn around the party that's presenting you the question, and they always seem to run in the direction that creates more controversy or more of a, sometimes someone might be coming at you against the grain, but there's a way to switch it.
Yeah.
But if someone's coming at them, they go at that person harder, and it just leads to a greater, a greater butting of the heads, so to speak.
And it leads to what we're doing now, is obviously discussing it on social media and YouTube and everything else. So, but anyway, I think if you
look, I'll probably get blocked by the family on social media just for saying Zoo's a bigger draw card. It is what it is. But what I'm saying is, I think that you can have these discussions without trying to cut down that someone isn't a draw card. We're not saying that Kambosos ain't a draw card, but I know if they heard a conversation like this, their immediate thought would be disrespect, because they've won at a more significant level than Tim Zoo, which is the truth. But
yeah, it is. Yep.
Doesn't matter. Look at boxing history. I'll post this one to you. Who's the bigger draw card, Ivan Robinson or Arturo Gatti? Ivan Robinson beat Gatti twice, but Gatti was always a draw card. Gatti lost to Carlos Boldemir. He was still able to come back and headline, and was still the bigger draw card than Boldemir. The attraction you are isn't reflective of the magnitude of fights you won, and a lot of people get that mixed up.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. Well, just look at what happened recently with Bivol and Canelo. You know, there's no comparison there.
Exactly. Look who's headlining. Look who's back. And another one. Chris, since it's close to home, Chris Terzievsky and Gallen.
Yeah.
Terzievsky beat Gallen quite comfortably, outboxed him. He doesn't replace the drawcard Gallen is. And he and his team know that.
And most Aussies wouldn't even remember his name now. That's how boxing goes, isn't it? But it is what it is. But yeah, so again, I just thought I'd put that out there, mate, because that's what it is. It's a talking point. All right, mate. Well, that's about it. I know I've thrown a lot at you tonight. That was a lot of talking points to get through there. Normally we have 3 or 4. I think it was about 8 or 9 we just had then. So, but I thought I'd just make full use of you while I've got you, because next week I've got the other 2 knuckleheads coming back, and we'll have the quiz and everything to go through. So
you've demoted me. I seen how it is. You demoted me,
mate. I would have you back anytime.
I did actually in the lead up to this show. I watched actually a really interesting, since the main fight that we've been building on this week's program is Briedis versus Opetai. It's right-hander versus southpaw. I hadn't watched it in about 15 years, but one of my favourite right-hander versus southpaw fights. You know what it was?
No.
1997 Australian Championships, Lyndon Hosking versus Paul Miller.
You watched that, did you?
And I'd actually forgotten you beat Paul, but, you know, like, and then it intrigued me because I was like, you know, Lyndon's got a dynamite right hand, but that hook, like the left hand was just so educated, doubling, tripling, nice lead hook. So I got to put the question to you. Yeah. I know that you don't like talking about your own career, but you were one of our finest international amateurs in the 90s. Are you a natural left-hander, or did you just develop that side from when you were a kid?
Well, it's funny. I obviously fought orthodox, but my left hand's my strongest hand. If I actually pick something
I knew it.
If I pick something up, it's with my left hand. Or if I throw right hand a bit at the end, if I've got to pick up something, I need a bit of strength, it's always with my left hand. And if I hit something, or it's always my left hand, it's always harder. So it's amazing that maybe I should have been a southpaw, I don't know. But yeah, always fought orthodox, but my left arm was always the struggle. I'm actually surprised I saw that fight. I know it is on YouTube. I did see that. I don't think there's any sound to it though, from what I saw, because. But yeah, Steve Dell still hasn't let me live it down.
No. but yeah, I mean, look, another famous guy who fought on his stronger side, Oscar De La Hoya, should have been a southpaw, but always led off the lead hand. But yeah, it surprised me because I always remembered you had a dynamite right hand. But then when I went back and watched that, I was like, you know, it's all off both hands. He's throwing heavy, and just the rhythm and sharpness he had off the left hand. I was like, I think that's his lead hand. But it was a great fight to watch because Paul's a friend, and I got so much respect for what he went on to accomplish, and I'm sure that defeat to you in the Nationals would have buoyed him on to become a better athlete and a better fighter, and strive to become, you know, the great fighter that he was.
He was, and obviously went on to win a Commonwealth Games gold medal after that. But you got to remember too, I think when we fought, I think I was 24, and I think he was only maybe 18 or 19. So it was sort of the end of my career and start of his. But he's a great guy. Great young fighter. As I said, Steve Dell has never let me live it down, and whenever he rings me, he always has a crack at me about beating his young charge. But look, yeah, it was probably one of those things that, just as I said, got him a bit earlier. But he was a great young fighter at the time. So not sure what he's up to these days. But hi, Paul, if you're watching. But
he's actually been back in Australia,
he's
been working. Yeah, he's been working as a commentator. So he commentated our last event, which was great to have him back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good day to Paul if you're watching this show. So, mate, that's about it for this show. Again, I really appreciate you being on. You know, we got a lot of positive feedback last week. It'll be obviously good to get the other 2 back from their little sabbatical. But, mate, while we've had you, it's been great for your input. Love your straight down the line, your knowledge and everything like that, mate. So we'd love to have you back again at some stage.
Yeah, thank you very much. Pleasure, brother.
Thanks, Mike. See you, mate.